There is James Woodall. These are all his slaves. Let's count them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. One of those nameless people could be my great-great-grandfather Mars. But because he was a slave, he wasn't deemed important enough to be named. A little-known fact is that, according to the United States Constitution at the time, slaves were considered to be 3/5 of a human being.
Spike Lee is one of America's best-known film directors. He first shot to fame back in 1986 with the groundbreaking hit She's Gotta Have It, in which he also starred as the motor-mouthed Mars Blackman. The success of this film allowed Spike to set up his production company, 40 Acres and a Mule Filmworks, in the neighborhood of Fort Greene, Brooklyn. Spike Lee is also a passionate and committed chronicler of African-American experiences in film, with movies like Do the Right Thing, Malcolm X, and When the Levees Broke. But for all the attention he brings to African-American history, Spike knows very little about the ancestry of his mother, Jacqueline Shelton Lee.
We know everything about my father's side, but my mother's side is a lot less known. My mother, her name was Jacqueline Shelton Lee. It was during my sophomore year, my mother died of cancer of the liver. One day, didn't feel well. She went in the hospital. They stayed, and then she was dead like 2 weeks later. Well, it was a devastating blow. I don't think the family really healed after that. Today, I'm taking my wife Tanya and my kid Satchel Jackson to her final resting place, so we can pay respects as I begin this journey into my mother's history. Basically, I wouldn't have been who I am now if my mother had not, gone. It was like a sacrifice or something, I know that makes sense, but that's the way I feel. Because when she died, I still had not even decided I want to be a filmmaker. Everybody grab a rock. She was always on her ass. You have to do better, you have to do better. Like, give us a break. So my drive, I get from my mother. My mother died when I was 19 years old, and my grandmother, Zimmie Shelton, became the most important person in my life. My grandmother put me through Morehouse College and NYU Graduate Film School, and she gave me the seed money for She's Gotta Have It, my first feature film. She was a great woman. Mama, as we called her, taught art for 50 years in the segregated schools of Georgia. She saved her money and Social Security checks to help pay for her grandchildren's college education. Mama died in 2006. She was 100 years old. And I had squandered many opportunities to ask her, to interview her on camera, what she knew about her family. Being a filmmaker, I should have been filming her, interviewing her, left and right. You take stuff for granted, and you think your mother, your father, your grandmother, your grandfather can be here forever. And then they were gone, it's like, dag. 5 years ago, I took a DNA test and found out that my father's side came from Cameroon and my mother's side came from Sierra Leone. I want to find my ancestors going back, way back to slavery on my mother's side. I'll have to start with Mama. I'm on my way to her hometown of Atlanta, Georgia, to begin my journey. I've always known that my grandmother Zimmie's family came from the city of Dublin in Lawrence County, Georgia. So I'm going there to see if I can find out more about her grandmother Lucinda, who was born into slavery.
Spike knows his grandmother Zimmie Retha's father was called Philip Jackson, and his mother was Lucinda Jackson. He knows that Lucinda, his great-great-grandmother, was born into slavery. But what more can he find out?
If I could find Lucinda's death records, it might tell me more about her life. Melvin Collier is an expert in African American genealogy. He's going to help me search through the records at the Lawrence County Library. I need to find out the year that Lucinda died. How we can do that?
Okay, here on ancestry.com, we're going to look at the Georgia death records, and then we'll go from there. Put in Lucinda Jackson. See what we find. We have several Lucinda Jacksons. Let's see if we find one for Lawrence County.
There it is.
There it is. We have a death date. May 13th, 1934. So now, since we have a death date, we're going to see if we can find an obituary for her.
Melvin and I are going through old Dublin newspapers from around the time of Lucinda's death. Put black people in the obituary, though?
It wasn't often, but sometimes, you know, people may, get lucky and find their ancestor in the newspaper. Okay, hold on, stop. I saw something. May 13th, 1934.
There it is.
There it is.
Colored news. The passing of Mrs. Lucinda Jackson, my great-great-grandmother. Mrs. Jackson survived by 3 sons. 3!
Oh, she had 3 sons. Wow.
Isaac Jackson, Philip Jackson of the city, and Wilson Jackson of Jeffersonville.
Along with his great-grandfather, Philip, Spike now knows Lucinda had 2 more sons, Isaac and Wilson. But there's no mention of their father in Lucinda's obituary. So who was Mr. Jackson?
This would be considered a genealogical gold mine to find your great-great-grandmother who was once enslaved. Now she has an obituary in the paper. Amazing.
Yeah.
Spike Lee is on a mission to uncover his family's slave past. His search has led him to Dublin, Georgia, where he has just found his great-great-grandmother, Lucinda Jackson's obituary.
There it is.
But it didn't list her husband's name, only the names of her 3 sons.
Well, maybe if we look up the death certificate for Phil Jackson, we'll find who was the father. His father's name was Mars. That's familiar. Mars lives. Isn't that amazing? When I was writing the script for She's Gotta Have It, I was stuck for the name of the character. And I called my grandmother up and I said, I need a name. And she came with this Mars. I remember vaguely her saying she had a crazy uncle named Mars. But she probably said she had a crazy grandfather named Mars. And it fit because Mars in the film is crazy. That's insane. My great-great-grandfather's name was Mars. So if Lucinda was born a slave, definitely Mars was born a slave. So now we gotta find out who is Mars.
Spike is heading to the Georgia State Archives, just south of Atlanta, on the trail of his great-great-grandfather, Mars Jackson. He's meeting historian Mark Schultz.
Gotta find my great-great-grandfather, Mars Jackson, was born a slave.
All right.
Well, I know who owned him.
Okay, we'll see what we can find here today. Let's see what we get if we have an open search with Mars and residence Georgia. Something here. There's Mars Woodall in Twiggs County.
Woodall.
Let me see what we get here.
Mars Woodall.
Yeah,
What's this right here?
he's a farmer.
Farmer.
There's
Lucy.
Lucy.
Short for
It
Lucinda.
very well could be short for Lucinda.
wife,
And then we've got Isaac,
Phil,
Philip,
and Wilson.
Wilson.
Wilson and Isaac and Phil were the children of Mars and Lucinda. That's them.
That looks like a good match. At this point in time, in 1880, they're going in the name of Woodall.
Jackson is the family name Mars chose to use later in life. But in 1880, when Mars was a young man, the family's name is recorded as Woodall, which could be the name of his former slave owner. After the Emancipation Proclamation, many freed men and women took the last name of their former slave owners as their own.
So we're probably not going to be looking for Jackson now. It's going to be looking for a Woodall in the area right around Twigs. Let's go on back up to...
Uh-oh, are we coming to this moment?
We're coming to this moment.
Who owned them?
We'll go. We're going there. We're going there. And we're going to look for a Woodall, Twigs County, Georgia. There's a match. There's 3 here. What it looks like to me is man and wife right there, and their son. Well, let's go see James Woodall.
August 1860. This is the 1860 census.
So right before the Civil War breaks out. Looking for
James Woodall, farmer.
He's a farmer, and he's got a big plantation. This is the value of the property, and at that time, this is a big place. The only Woodall that we find in Twigs County. We've got your great-grandfather and mother in Twigs County.
Mars and Lucinda. That's who owned them.
I think that's very likely.
Is there any way to tell for sure James Woodall owned Mars?
We won't have names, it'll just be ages, but we're going to look for a James Woodall, his slave schedule in Twigs County.
Can you explain what
The slave schedule
is?
is this is the white census, right? And the slave schedule is who else is living in Georgia, and they're not put into the census at that time. It's separate.
There is James Woodall. These are all his slaves. Let's count them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. One of those nameless people could be my great-great-grandfather Mars. But because he was a slave, he wasn't deemed important enough to be named. A little-known fact is that, according to the United States Constitution at the time, slaves were considered to be 3/5 of a human being.
Spike Lee is on a journey into his family's ancestry in honor of his grandmother, Zimmie Jackson. So far, he's discovered his great-great-grandparents, Lucinda and Mars, in the 1880 census, 17 years after the Emancipation Proclamation. He's also found that Mars was listed as a farmer. Now Spike wants to know if Mars owned the land he was farming, or if he was still working for his former master. When slavery was brought to an end with the 13th Amendment in 1865, General Sherman ordered each freed head of household to be granted up to 40 acres of land, which was referred to as 40 acres and a mule. For the majority of slaves, the promise was never honored. So even though they were freed, most emancipated slaves had no choice but to rely on their former owners for a living. It was this event in history which inspired Spike Lee to name his production company 40 Acres and a Mule.
So let's see if we can find Mr. Mars Woodall. This is the Census of Agriculture, Twigs County, state of Georgia, 1880. Here down this line here is actually Woodall Mars. So he's here in the agricultural census. He's in the agricultural census if you're an independent farmer, if you're a renter, if you're an owner. That says, I'm an owner of this land.
He owned.
He owns.
He's a landowner.
He's a landowner, 1880. 80 acres of tilled land.
80?
80 acres, which is pretty
That's 2
decent.
times 40.
That's 2 times 40. He's doubled up your, you got some catching up to do with that 40 acres.
I know.
Plus 50 acres of woodland. Plus, next line over.
75?
75 acres of other land that he can develop if he wants to. He can use it as pasture.
Is it plausible that he he bought this land from Woodall, or it was loaned to him?
It sure is. People are complicated. People are idiosyncratic. And if you live next to somebody for your whole life, sometimes bad things happen and sometimes good things happen. Sometimes people actually come to respect each other despite the power differential between them. And so frequently, ex-slaves who got ahead, who got land, used relationships with previous masters that they had some kind of good relationship with to put in a good word for them. If it wasn't Woodall giving them a loan, is going down to the bank and saying, you know, I can speak for this man. I think he's a hard worker, he's a responsible guy. Because once you get that first break, the next break's easier. Right? It's just getting something to work with.
So it comes down to ownership of land.
It did.
Get some land.
It did for these people.
Get some land. Amazing. He was a farmer, had a lot of land. That was the #1 goal coming out of slavery. You wanted to be a landowner. You lived off the land, you worked the land. This area, Twiggs County, in middle Georgia, was hostile for Negroes at that time. The Klan was roaming. This area was also known for lynching. So in order to do what he did, he had great adversity. Before I left, Mark gave me a map to find the land Mars owned. That's Georgia clay right there. Red Georgia clay. It's a magnificent view, and at one time, my great-great-grandfather, Mars Jackson, owned this land. In tribute to Mars, I had sent to me from New York what I wore in my first film. She's Gonna Have It. This is it. This is what Mars looked like. Many years later, but it all started here. It was not an accident that I called up my grandmother, asked her for a name. That was a spirit. That was a spirit that made me pick up the phone and say, Mama, I need a name. That was the spirit of Mars that made that happen. And his wife, Lucinda. The United States of America may not have given Mars his 40 acres and a mule, but it looks like he did much better than that. He had more than 80 acres. Before I go, there's one last thing I must do. Dig up some of this land. I'm gonna show it to my children. Say, this is where you came from. This Georgia red clay. Sun's about to set here, and we gotta get out of here. They said, don't let the sun go down on your black ass. You better get out of town, boy. You know what's good for y'all. All right, yes, master. I'm leaving right now. I don't want no trouble. Just passing through, minding my business. Good day. The red clay in my hands is the same dirt Mars worked, making a life for himself and his family after the Civil War. Unfortunately, no one knows what happened to Mars or how he lost his land after the 1880s. But he set the bar high early, To go from a slave to a landowner? Now I know where my family gets that entrepreneurial spirit.
Spike Lee is trying to uncover more about his grandmother Zimmie's family history. So far, he's found his great-great-grandfather, the original Mars, and his probable slave master, James Woodall.
That's who owned them.
That's it.
Now, he's turning his attention to Mars's wife, Lucinda, to find out more about her ancestors. He's been sent a copy of Lucinda's death certificate.
It says her parents were Wilson Griswold and Matilda Griswold. But who were they?
Because the slaves weren't freed until after the Civil War ended in 1865, the first possible census that Lucinda's parents, Wilson and Matilda, could have been listed in is 1870. So Spike's starting his search there.
So I'm gonna try to find Griswold here. There's Matilda Griswold. She's a cook. She's living with someone named Ebenezer Greer, 48, and he's a retired lawyer. He has a wife named Eliza, who's 41. It's listed here. Matilda is a mulatto. In Griswoldville, Matilda Griswold. Given that both Lucinda's parents were called Griswold and her mother lived in Griswoldville, it's likely that Griswold was the name of the man who owned them. We don't see Wilson Griswold on the census, who is Lucinda's father. So where's Griswoldville, Georgia, and what happened to Wilson Griswold? I'm meeting Dinah Berry, a historian of the 19th century South in Macon, Georgia.
So let's look at Griswold, okay? So this is the 1850 slave census schedule, and we have here Samuel Griswold. Then as we look to see how many slaves he has, these are all Griswold slaves.
He owned a lot of slaves.
Yep. So large slaveholder.
But that makes sense because it's Griswoldville.
He has a town named after him, right?
Right. Oh, he named the town himself.
Yeah. So that brings us to where's Wilson, right?
Where's Wilson?
Come across this document. This is actually a contract for slaves to work in a business.
They worked the cotton gin business.
The owner is Griswold, and he's naming his slaves to be hired out.
George, Jerry, Henry, Little Jackson, Matthew, and Wilson. There he is.
Wilson. And the thing I think was most interesting about this is that when you have slaves that are named, they're obviously valued slaves. So these are probably skilled mill workers,
Right.
Mechanics. They go into the gin shop, and that's when they did the work. And that's probably where Wilson was, which means Griswold owned skilled slaves.
Right.
And I also came across this document.
On or about the 21st day of November last, the Federal Army under General W.T. Sherman came to the residence of said Samuel Griswold and destroyed by burning his grist and sawmills, foundry, gin shop. Said enemy also took and carried away 5 Negro men. All right, that might be him.
As the Union Army commander, General Sherman conducted a strategy of total war and scorched earth in Georgia. It destroyed industries that supported the Confederacy, including the cotton gin factory in Griswoldville, where Wilson built and maintained cotton engines. This was just one stop on Sherman's march from Atlanta to Savannah.
This document also indicates that these slaves were taken, with them.
Not all of them, though.
Right, but these 5 individuals.
Yeah, but what about
the
But
rest?
there's hundreds of slaves on this
Exactly.
plantation. Were there any Negroes in Sherman's army?
There is evidence of of slaves that worked for the Union. A lot of them did. A lot of them joined and went because they looked at them as the great liberators.
Right. So, Wilson might have left with General Sherman.
It's possible. Either
Taken
taken
by-
or killed.
Killed.
We don't know that. I mean, they never returned. They never saw them again. This is 1865. So right before the war ended. This is in February. War ends in April.
An ancestor of mine was on a plantation that General Sherman came just burnt to the ground.
Exactly.
That's history right there.
It sure is. Absolutely.
Spike Lee is on a mission to discover his mother's family's slave roots. He's already found Mars and Lucinda, his great-great-grandparents. Now he's on the trail of Lucinda's father, Wilson Griswold.
Wilson might have left with General Sherman.
Either
by-
taken or killed.
He wants to find out what happened to Wilson and the Griswold plantation. There's nothing left of Griswoldville now. There's just a street sign, train tracks, and a plaque commemorating the spot where the cotton gin factory once stood. The factory and the town were destroyed during the Civil War.
The Confederate pistol factory. In 1862, to meet the pressing need of the Confederate States Army for revolvers of the Colt pattern, the Griswold Cotton Gin Company's plant on this site was converted to a pistol factory. This history is crazy. This is crazy. Not only were they slave owners, they were supplying Colt pistols for the Confederacy. And Wilson, my great-great-great-grandfather, worked there. In Sherman's march towards the sea, they burnt down this factory, and that's really the last time Wilson, we know what happened to him. We don't know if he died there or he left with the Union. But he had to know what these pistols were being used for. We'll never know how he felt about it. Was he conflicted? Did he have misgivings, or was he just doing what Mazza told him to do?
Griswold historian Bill Bragg is joining Spike to shed some light on Wilson's experience at the cotton gin factory.
Hi,
I know.
Bill Bragg.
Spike Lee.
Nice to meet you.
How you doing?
Pretty good.
So you got some information?
A little bit. Let's see what we have here. This was built right here.
Is that authentic?
This is authentic.
And there's a good chance that my great-great-great-grandfather, Wilson Griswold, built this.
Oh, yes, he would have to have been involved in part of the process.
Right.
No other pistol manufacturer in the Confederacy made more than this one did. This factory here made more than any of the others.
My great-great-great-grandfather built this Confederate pistol,
Exactly.
which was used to kill.
The people who were coming to liberate him.
Yep. The irony.
Yeah, very heavy irony.
It was definitely a shocker knowing that my great-great-great-grandfather made pistols for the Confederacy. So no pictures of the...
No pictures of the factory.
What about Mazza Griswold?
There is a picture of him. That's probably around 1860. He had a stroke by that time, and he doesn't look real happy.
As my grandma would say. It's the only known picture of him?
That's the only known picture.
What about, what's his wife's name?
Louisa.
Louisa, you got a picture of her?
There is a picture of her. Neither one of them look real happy.
Woo! Now let me ask you a question. Wilson Griswold married a woman named Matilda, and the census she's listed as mulatto. Is there a chance he was her father?
Oh, yes, there's a chance.
At the very beginning of this journey, I wanted to know who owned my ancestors. Now we know. It's also a good chance that I might be related to this person. Crazy.
One of Spike Lee's biggest influences was his grandmother, Zimmie Retha. He started this journey trying to find out more about his mother and grandmother's family history, and he's found a lot of surprises along the way.
He's a landowner.
He's a landowner, 1880.
It all started here.
Now, he may have found his family slave owners.
Oh, yes, there's a chance.
And it appears his great-great-great-grandmother, Matilda, is the missing link to uncovering his family's past. With this new information, he can explore the possibility that Samuel Griswold was Matilda's father.
She's listed as mulatto,
Right. So
but Wilson is listed as a black, though.
right.
Who was her father? Is she the daughter of the slave owner?
Good question. There's a possibility she was, you know, the descendant of Griswold. We know that in the 1870s, in the census, Matilda was a cook, right? In the Greer household. She was probably working prior to the end of slavery and even afterwards doing the exact same labor.
They worked in the big house.
And remained.
So we got the Griswolds and the Greers.
Yes. Griswold's daughter, Eliza, married Ebenezer C. Greer. And we have the slave schedules for Ebenezer C. Greer in July of 1860. From the 1870 census that you saw.
Matilda was 44.
Yep. So considering the age of Matilda, it seems to me that in 1860, 33-year-old female mulatto, possibly this is the 33-year-old Matilda.
At this time in history, if a slave was fathered by a white slave owner, sometimes the slave was gifted to another family member and sent away. If Samuel Griswold was in fact Matilda's father, that may be how she came to work for Samuel's daughter, Eliza Greer.
I did some research on ancestry.com and came across a descendant of the Griswold family.
Just alive today?
Yes. And I think she would like to meet you. So, what are your thoughts?
Does she know her? She owns slaves?
I'm quite sure she does.
I'm flying to Texas. I'm about to meet a living descendant of Samuel Griswold, the man who owned my slave ancestor Wilson, and he may have possibly fathered his wife Matilda through rape. I've really been trying to keep an open mind. She had nothing to do with slavery. I don't even know if she actually knows what her ancestors did.
Hi.
Hello.
Mr. Lee.
How you doing? Guinevere.
Please call me Guinevere. So, I understand that we have Samuel Griswold in our lives.
Who is he to
And
you?
He's my great-great-grandfather.
Yeah.
And what about you?
My great-great-great-grandparents.
Right, both?
Wilson and Matilda Griswold.
Right.
They took on the name of the slave master.
Right.
And your great-great-grandfather was possibly the father of my great-great-great-grandmother. We are possibly third cousins twice removed.
Twice removed. I have a famous relative.
Throughout the years, I would just be in an airport in New York or anywhere in America and just see a random white American say, and think to myself, you know, I could be related to that person. And I never thought any more about that. But now it's hit me in the face. I'm on your couch and we're cousins.
You've been... You know what I would like you to know?
What's that?
Slavery is awful. The situation of the people who lived for generations after, was really horrible. But I think a lot more people were just as horrified by both slavery and the treatment of blacks in our country. Excuse me, getting snivelly. How do you feel about it?
How I feel?
Yeah, about Samuel Griswold.
Well, I can't love the man. I just can't. Or his wife, or any slave owner, because how can you own another human being?
So do you know who you are?
Oh, I've always known who I've been, who I am, but now I know more. This journey's been very meaningful. It's a living record of my ancestors on my mother's side of the family. Hopefully in the future, I do a film, a slave epic. Really do something that deals with the complexities that happened on the plantation. My grandmother, she might have known a lot and never told us, maybe because we didn't ask. I should have put on film what she could remember about her side of the family, but she would have been happy that we're doing this, for sure. She would want her great-great-grandchildren to know the legacy of the family. I hope that my children understand that they're on the shoulders of great people. They should use that to motivate them to excel. History is very important. I am who I am today based upon my ancestors.